as I said, you're so welcome here. You're welcome online as we continue our journey through the book of Ephesians. And I'd say at the moment we have arrived at our turning point. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 in Ephesians, this letter written by Paul. He's in prison and he's planted this church, and now he's writing back to them a few years later. He's talked about the incomparable riches and beauty of a glorious and a faithful God, and all the lengths that Jesus has gone to draw us into this life of freedom. And now Paul's attention turns. He's kind of saying, now in light of all of this, the next 3 chapters, I want to talk to you about this, the church that Jesus longs for. The church that Jesus longs for in our world. And so over the next few weeks, as we follow along with this second half, we're going to get a little bit more practical. There's going to be a few more kind of application points, and as we all kind of pursue this unified desire. How do we live this beautiful life that we are called to as the church and as individuals? So firstly, it says this, verse 1, therefore, which we've spoken about before, this is the turning point of the book. Therefore, live a life worthy of the calling you received. Now, I know that when I use a word like calling, you might be thinking, oh, that's just like that special thing that vicars have, people who are called to lead a church or have this special call on their life that God has specially anointed them for something. Or you might think of a missionary who's been called out of their home country and gone to a foreign country to go and serve the poor and do something very impressive. But the majority of the people in this room, I'd say bar 2 or 3 of us, you're not doing that. You don't feel kind of called to church leadership or to be a missionary. You might be thinking, hey man, I work in IT. I don't want to go to rural Rwanda and start up food banks, or I'm a single mum and kind of looking after my kids and doing the school run. I don't really feel like I'm called to plant a church. And kind of quite rightly, many people, when we come to this word calling, they can often feel like that doesn't apply to me. There's nothing significant about, I'm just doing my thing, trying to be a Christian, trying to be a good person, following Jesus. And Paul is breaking apart that same assumption here to the church in Ephesus. He was saying that some teachers, basically some people have kind of come along and given you this false dichotomy, which is a fancy way of saying it's it's not an either or thing. It's not kind of you either are called or you're not. You are either chosen for a special task or you're not. It's not that some of you have vocational jobs like vicars or missions workers or even doctors or teachers. It's not like some of you do a job that's kind of passion-filled and some of you just have jobs. He's saying that I want to blow that perception apart because it's simply not true. He is saying that fundamentally we all share the same upward call of being a disciple of Jesus. We all are called to the way of Jesus, to know God, to draw close to him, to seek his kingdom first. To know Jesus, become like him, to do the things that Jesus did here on earth. One of the reasons that we use this phrase, the way of Jesus, as Johnny just mentioned, our vision is to follow the way of Jesus, to play our part in the renewal of the city. The reason that we use that wording is that I want to get across that this is an ongoing, daily, lifelong journey of becoming more and more like Jesus. We use that phrase the way as in there is a path for your feet. There is a direction for your life. There is a purpose to your life. But that's not something that's just kind of given to you and then off you go. It's this daily, ongoing, working it out on and on. Discipleship is having Jesus as your model, your guide, or your pattern, being filled by the Spirit and then interacting with the world around you out of the overflow of his love for you. And so when it comes to calling, there is no hierarchy in the kingdom of God. My calling is not better than your calling. My calling is not more special than your calling. Your life has a calling on it to follow and point to the way of Jesus. Even when you're sorting out the mainframe as an IT consultant, I don't do IT. When you're crunching numbers in an Excel spreadsheet, when you're on the school run, when you're serving coffee behind the bar, you are in your calling, because your calling is to simply follow Jesus and point others to do the same. And so Paul says this: live a life worthy of your calling. This word worthy in Greek is axios, which can be translated as something that matches its actual value, something that matches up to the worth that it has. And axios is where we get this English word axle or axis. What this word here, specifically here, is trying to get across it's like this balancing point of a scale. It's like the middle point of a scale that we have here. Why Paul is using it is he's saying everything that you've learned in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Let me quickly recap just some of them. Everything from the powerful and the dynamic beauty and peace of God, who has blessed us in in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing, that we have been chosen in the Father, redeemed by the Son, and sealed in the Spirit, that we have been moved from death into life, graciously becoming these masterpieces, these works of art that God calls us into, that we find a home and a family as children of God, marked by the image of God, called into this new humanity where we now get to play our part in the immeasurable love of God. All of these things in chapters 1, 2, and 3. It says, take that and put that on one side of the scale, on one side of the axios. Put that here, and now all you need to do is to figure out how to live a life in response to that. How to live a life that is worthy of all of these magnificent things that you've already been given. These things are already true of you. You don't have to earn them. You don't have to be a special way or have a certain calling to get them. These are already true, that you are adopted, that you are anointed, that you are sealed by the Spirit. Now work out, how do I live up to that? How do I make a life worth living as a part of that? In summary, what Paul is saying is that your life was meant for so much more than a decent job. Your life was meant for so much more than like a happy relationship or nice clothes or a nice holiday or driving a half-decent car. In Jesus, you are part of something that is so immense and so glorious that it goes beyond, it's been here before your existence and goes beyond your time here on earth. It is much, much bigger than you. You are part of God's master plan of rescuing and redeeming and renewing all of creation through the inbreaking of his kingdom here on earth, through his people, which is you, through the church, which is us together, to bring about the renewal of all things. That is what you're called to. You are called to play your part in God's master plan of renewal. That is what you're called to. So the question is not, gosh, what am I going to do with my life? How do I work out what I'm supposed to do with my life? But rather, how are you going to respond to the call that is already on your life? That has already been spoken over you in Jesus. Are you living out of this sense of the bigger picture that God is creating in the world? Are you living out the bigger sense of the narrative of God that has been here before you were here and will continue after? I say that to ask you this. Think about how that perspective might change some of the things that you're facing in life today. Think about taking that attitude in some of the things that you're struggling with today. I started this series by saying that one of the most common pastoral conversations, conversations that I have as a vicar, is with people asking me, like, how do I know what I'm supposed to do in my life? What job should I have? Who should I be with? Where should I live? Kind of like big, life-changing, altering conversations. And for those who are trying to work out what is next in life, and that's not just limited to young people. This is a question that we continually come up in our lives over and over again. For those who are trying to work out what is next in life, let me ask you, do you find comfort in knowing that you are part of God's redemptive plan for all of human history? Do you find confidence knowing that there is a God that has gone before you, that has a plan to renew and redeem all of creation, that he wants you to play your part in that, and simply just by following him and mimicking him and becoming more like him and taking on his character and taking on his habits and his disciplines? Do you find confidence in that? Does that bring you hope? Does that bring you assurance and certainty? If it doesn't, it should. It should give you confidence knowing that there is a plan for all of creation and you get to play your little part. I think that's one of the most freeing and beautiful gifts that being a Christian has to offer you. That your hope, that your future is secure in Jesus. Yes, there will be trouble. In fact, Jesus guarantees it. In John, he says, there will be trouble in life, not like kind of if you have trouble. Yes, there will be trouble. Yes, there will be days of struggle. And yes, there will be times of heartache and pain, but all of that in the grand scheme of God's master plan, in the grand scheme of all of eternity, pales into context to say you are part of something bigger. Keep going. The King of the universe is making all things new. And he wants to use you, little old me, as part of that. That is your calling to discipleship out of the great wonder and blessing of God's love for you. So, we want to ask ourselves today, what is discipleship? What is following the way of Jesus? What does that look like? What kinds of disciples does Jesus long for us to be as we try and work out what the church that Jesus longs for us to be is? So what Paul does is he kind of sets this up. He says, the life worthy of your calling, considering all of these amazing things that has happened in the past. This is an amazing thing about the Christian faith, is that you start with notoriety. You start by being given this identity as children of God, regardless of where you're from. And then out of a response, out of the overflow, we move to action. So we're going to look in this series at what growing into maturity looks like, what people whose words yield power for both building up and tearing down, what a life of holiness and purity looks like, what honor looks like in our relationships, as well as how to equip ourselves for spiritual battle. So let me first pick up on the first 4 words that he gives us. He's saying, this is how to live a life worthy of the calling that you've received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. I was on a missions trip to Thailand a few years back, and at the end of our time together, we had a few days off, and we decided to spend one of those days in silence, and then we'd come together at the end and kind of share and pray with one another. And I kind of taken myself off, and I was reading in a hammock, obviously, and like having a good time and kind of praying and relaxing. And then I went for a swim in the ocean because I was in Thailand, and that felt like a spiritual thing to do. So I went out for a swim and looked back and thought, gosh, I'm quite far away from the beach. So I decided to swim back in, was swimming for a bit, and I was getting no closer. I thought, oh gosh, and start to panic a little bit. And then I started swimming. It was like swallowing water, kind of praying manically, oh my God, I'm going to die. Guys, I didn't die. And I was swimming in. I kind of beat the current that was coming out towards me. And I got onto the beach. And as I slumped on the floor, I heard the voice of God speak to me and say this: you are going to face currents, trends, temptations in this life, and you are going to have to be so resolute if you want to stick close to me. Everything, most of the things about the world that you live in are going to force you away from me. There are going to be distractions and temptations and reasons for you and excuses for you to find to not follow me. You're going to have to be so committed, so resolute to stick close to me. This is what I've called you to, John. This was like a wake-up moment for me. I went home, went back to the place that we're staying, and that evening we started to share, and one of my friends, he started to share, and he said, gosh, yeah, earlier I went out for this swim, and I kind of got stuck in the currents, and I was trying to swim back, and I thought, flipping heck, I'm going to get lost here. He eventually made it back, and as he landed on the beach, God spoke to him, and he said this: you are going to face currents and trends and distractions and temptations. You've got to stick close to me. You've got to be resolute in your following of me. An amazing confirmation of what God had already spoken to me. And I found this to be completely true. If I'm not careful, my tendency is to wander. If I'm not attentive, my tendency is to get distracted. I have to be so resolute, determined to draw near to God, because the barrage of noise, the barrage of distraction that comes against me is loud. It's distracting. It's off-putting. I have got to be so committed to. And so we take these first four words: humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another. These are not words that you would use to describe 21st century Western modern society. These are not like the hallmarks of our world today. The mantra of a modern Western world is express yourself, follow your own desires, throw off the anchor of tradition because it's oppressive, let the winds carry you to adventure, be free, be unique, be yourself. Yet the call to discipleship from Jesus in Matthew 16 is this: whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. This is difficult, hard stuff. You have to really be determined to follow Jesus. This is countercultural living, against the tide. This will not always be easy or comfortable. So with that cheery note, let me pick apart these four words. Here we go. Firstly, be completely humble. The word for humble here translates to think or to judge with lowliness. Greek scholars writing about the time think that this word was invented by Christians because the Greek Roman culture at the time didn't have a word for humility. They so despised humility that they just didn't honor it with a word. They thought that humility was akin to low self-esteem. And as Greek Romans, as kind of anyone, you'd be thinking, why would I want low self-esteem? That sounds like a lame thing to do. Why would we ever advocate for that? And so Christians, they had to invent a word to describe the kind of humility Jesus calls us to show one another. And this same word is used initially by Jesus in Matthew 11, where he says this: take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. I think what this word is getting at is this: as followers of Jesus, when we walk into a room, our attitude, our mindset should be, what a privilege it is to be here. What an honor it is for me to spend time with the people that I'm with today. We should walk into church like this and think, wow, I get to sit with some of the winning players of the Solent Division 1 Championship Cup. What an honor. I've got so many questions. I want to ask you about your season, and I want to find out more about you. You should walk in and think, I get to sit with nurses. I get to sit with single mums. I get to sit with IT consultants. What a joy. What an honor to be able to share life, to get to know, to have time to interact with these people. Imagine if that was your attitude. Imagine if this was our attitude whenever we went into any room, not just this one. Can you imagine how that would change the atmosphere? Can you imagine how that would change some of the discussions in your boardroom? Can you imagine it would change the atmosphere in your lecture hall? This is counter-cultural invitation from Jesus to humble yourselves so that others are elevated. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. This is totally counter-cultural. So firstly, humility. Second framework that Paul gives for our discipleship is this: being completely gentle. The root of this word is this idea of this wild animal that has been tamed. In other words, it's this kind of incredible strength that has been brought under control and is now given a purpose. You know, I think it's so hard to be gentle in a world because we are all so opinionated. We have opinions about everything. We have opinions about things that are really important and that are really fundamentally kind of true about society, about justice, we also have unlimited opinions about things that are just not relevant. And we are so quick to draw conclusions because we have strong emotions, because we've kind of been discipled by these kind of little sort of 25 character news feeds of like quick reaction, quick response to that reaction, quick. What happens is that we lose the ability to be gentle. We are so quick to cancel and block things in our culture. We are so quick to shout louder or hide. And Jesus calls us not to cancel our enemies, but to love them. Meaning people that we disagree with, opinions that we find hard. Our calling is not to just block them out or shout louder than them. Our calling is to love our enemies. This is so hard and so difficult. As Hannah and I attempt to raise strong boys of courage and conviction and faith and character, one of the things that we are trying to do is acknowledge and validate their emotion before we try and correct the course of their actions. So, for example, we often say, it's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hit. Or it's totally okay to feel disappointed. Hey, I feel disappointed too. But it's not okay to grab your brother's shirt and just dump pasta on his head. Our 2-year-old has learned a couple of new words recently. One of them is butterfly, that he says like that. And the other one is sorry. And he now, to his 4-year-old brother, gets, often in the bath, he gets like one of these woggle things. And he just goes, sorry, psh, sorry, psh, sorry, just like endlessly, which I actually let happen, so it's quite funny. But you know, like it's so, this kind of attitude, it's needed with us, with adults too. It's okay to feel angry. Hey, like it's okay if you feel anger. It's okay when you feel disappointment. It's okay when you feel injustice. Those are completely legitimate emotions, but it's not okay to lash out. It's not okay to kind of passively, aggressively block someone out or give them the silent treatment. It's not okay to tear people down behind their backs. It's okay to feel those emotions, how we then deal with them, how we respond to them. That's what's going to mark us out as followers of Jesus. This is counter-cultural, to take the wild, untamed power of our emotions and in becoming like Jesus, redirect them and point them towards a better purpose of becoming gentle, becoming considerate, and humbling ourselves as we offer and show mercy to others. Christians, we are called to feel passionate. What I'm not saying is that we all need to be like placid, kind of like pushovers. What we are called to is to feel deeply. Christians are called to righteous anger towards injustice, towards sin and suffering. When I see abuse of the vulnerable, particularly when I see the abuse of a vulnerable child, I get angry. Yes, I get sad, but I get mad that is happening. That's happening in our city. I get really annoyed. But I also know that the call is to find the right times, to find the right places, to express that passion, to express that emotion for the sake of others. Because so often when we're quick, when we're lashing out, when we're being passive-aggressive, when we're shutting people out, it's kind of a quick self-preservation. But the calling is to look outwards, to tame that wild emotion for the sake of others, for the sake of yourself, ultimately. So thirdly, we are called to have patience. One of the ways that this word in Greek can be translated is to be long-tempered rather than short-tempered. And what the biggest problem, I think the biggest kind of frustration in my life of leading a church of people like you guys is people are just so annoying. Do you know what I mean? Just, oh my gosh, they're the worst. Like opinions and like idiosyncrasies and characteristics. This church would be so much better if there weren't any people in it. It would be perfect. It'd be like my little perfect place. And you know what the worst thing about being in a church like ours is that vicars are just so annoying. Just like standing up there doing that stupid talk thing. Like, when can we go back to the singing? Oh, he's so annoying. As a role play thing. I feel like I think someone left at that point in the 10. So that was a joke. I love you. You're the best. One of the rarest commodities in our culture is having patience with people. We live so now, instant. If it's not here now, it's not worth it. I cannot wait. Why have Amazon still not worked out 1-hour deliveries? This is ridiculous. It's 2021. We are so instant, so quick. And there's this account in the Gospels where someone comes up to Jesus and says, hey, someone in church sinned against me. Should I leave that church? And he says, no. Why on earth would you want to do that? He's like, well, they wronged me. Obviously, I need to move. And he says, no, forgive them. Mend that bridge. Restore relationship with that person. He says, okay, gosh, but how many fine, I'll do that a couple of times, like 7 times, and then either you ask them to leave or I'll leave, like, surely. And he says, no, 70 times, 7 times, you should go on having patience, having long-tempered attitudes towards one another, loving one another. Here is Jesus' heart for the church. There should be no other community in the world that offers patience like ours. This is the church that Jesus longs for, patient, humble, gentle. Into a divided, polarized, and cancel culture world, Jesus calls us to be the community that models the solution to the world's problems. We take the attitude, the characteristics of God with us. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. Lastly, on a similar theme, he says this: bearing with one another in love. That can also be translated as putting up with one another in love. And here's the key part of that phrase: it's in love. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. That's 1 Peter 4. Proverbs 10, hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all transgressions. There's this model, kind of a tool in the marriage course that we run here to encourage and equip people for lifelong relationship. And one of the tools is when you are arguing, when you're having a conflict, which obviously Hannah and I never do, so theoretically. That's like obviously the funny part of that joke is I'm part of that marriage. When you're having a conflict, when you're disagreeing with one another, like imagine, like if Hannah was here, imagine that the conflict, you put it in a box, and you take that box and then you put it on the coffee table in front of you, and you sit together. What you're doing in two things is that you're saying we are a team, we are a partnership, we are together, we are for each other. We want good things for each other. So let's look at this problem together. And let's not look at each other and hurl kind of insults at each other. Let's look at this problem together. And the other thing is that it draws you closer together. It reminds you of your love and your affection for one another. You know, it's the same attitude that Paul is speaking into here. He says, don't let your differences divide you. Don't see someone else's faults before you see their glory and their grace first. It's like Paul is saying, like, throw a big blanket over someone else's sin and their shortcomings and their perceived failures. Throw a big blanket over it so that first thing that you see their humanity. You see their image as a child of God. You see that there is something that you can unite over. Basically, see the best in others. Bear with one another by uplifting the others. Choose to see the best in others. So humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love. Why are we called to that? Why is this the place where Paul starts with these whole 3 chapters? He starts with these 4 phrases. They are so difficult, and we are clearly going to get that wrong a lot of the time. But he calls us to this for this simple reason, is that this is what Jesus has already done for you. This is what Jesus has already done for you. In his humility, he gave his life upon a cross to deal with your sin and your brokenness so that you can now have freedom. In his gentleness, he picks you up and he calls you in. In your brokenness, he says, come and be my follower. I'm going to show you the rhythms of life. I'm going to show you how to live. In his patience, he continues to walk with us. He endures with us. He suffers with us. He encourages us as we become more and more of the people that he's called us to be. He is our model. These are the characteristics of Jesus himself. And then Jesus says this to us, John 13, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love. This is so much more than like kind of treat people with respect and they should respect you back. This is so much more than treat others well or treat others as you would like to be treated. It's so much better than that. It's love others just as I have loved you. Go the extra mile, show humility, be gentle, have patience, bear with, put up with one another just as I have done so for you. So that, verse 3, you would keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body, one Spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. This is the reason that we do it. This is the kind of outworking of our humility. I spoke last week on being a church that is committed to the powerful and dynamic peace of God that leads us into this new humanity. That humanity that makes us equals, that makes us like one another because we are made in the image of God. We are all his children, and that we can choose to see that as we listen to one another. You know, if we're going to be a united church, if we're going to listen to each other well, then becoming the kinds of followers Jesus longs for us to be is where the rubber hits the road. This is where it gets real. If we want to unite over our shared humanity and not divide over our differences, then we're going to need to do the stuff that Paul describes in the second half of Ephesians. Humility, gentleness, patience, forbearing, and the rest. We are products of our family, of our culture, of the accounts that we follow, of the music that we listen to, of the accounts that we read, the shows that we stream, the friends that we keep. We cannot help but be influenced by the world around us. So ultimately, the question for you and for me is, who is discipling you today? Or let me put it this way, what is discipling you today? Following the way of Jesus, empowered by, fueled by, and directed by the Spirit of God. This is the wonderful gift available. It's not do better, try better, kind of become a good person and then you will attain some kind of glory. It's come and walk with me, learn from me. Let me help you as you walk in humility and gentleness. Let me put my Spirit in you so that you become patient and loving. Will you let Jesus come and lead you into freedom today? Will you walk with him each day, fill your mind with his heart and his words of truth through the scripture? Will you let his Spirit burn in a passion for you, for goodness, for holiness, humility, and gentleness? This is the life that you are called to. This is the worthy life that you have been called to. Each one of you to know, to draw close to God, to seek his kingdom, and to follow him as his disciple. This is your upward call in God. How do you want to respond today? In Jesus' name, amen.